There is a stretch of land outside Manaus where the dirt is darker than the surrounding earth, 30 centimeters deep, sometimes a meter, sometimes 2. It is black, fine, smells faintly of charcoal, and when you push your hand into it, the soil parts the way good potting mix parts in a nursery. The forest around that land is dying. That black soil is 1,500 years old, and last harvest, the family that owns the small patch pulled tomatoes off it that weighed nearly a kilogram each. The forest around it is dying because the people clearing it today burn the trees. The black patch is 1,500 years old because the people who made it did not burn the trees. They charred them. The difference is one number: 400 degrees Celsius. Below it you have black earth that holds a forest for 1,000 years. Above it you have smoke. Listen, there is a reason no one talks about this anymore. I want to tell you about that number tonight, because the people who carry the knowledge are mostly gone, and the people clearing the Amazon with kerosene rags right now are doing exactly what their great-grandparents would never have done. Not for lack of will, for lack of memory. They forgot. And out of the ash, only the ash grows. Stay with me, and I will tell you what is supposed to grow out of it. The Spanish chronicler Francisco de Orellana sailed down the Amazon in 1542. He came back to Spain telling stories of vast cities along the river, roads, cleared fields, population in the millions. He was called a liar. Conquistadors who returned to that river 60 years later found nothing. Empty forest, a few small tribes. Historians filed Orellana's account under fiction for 400 years. In 1958, a Dutch soil scientist named Wim Sombroek arrived in Brazil. He started keeping field notebooks. The notebooks contain a phrase that he wrote 30 separate times across 40 years of work. The phrase is, "There is a soil here that should not exist. Black soil, deep, fertile, in a region of ancient lateritic earth that is supposed to be one of the most nutrient-starved soils on the planet." Sombroek wrote papers, nobody read them. He died in 2003, just before the final puzzle piece arrived. The puzzle piece was a German chemist named Bruno Glaser at the University of Bayreuth. Glaser took samples of that black soil to a laboratory in southern Germany and ran them through radiocarbon dating, electron microscopy, and isotopic analysis. He published in 2001. The soil was not natural. The soil was deliberately made by human hands 1,500 years ago. Continuously, over centuries, by people we know almost nothing about. The technology they used had a name in the academic literature within 2 years of Glaser's paper: slash and char. Now here is the part that matters. Stay with me. There were 2 ways to clear forest in the pre-Columbian Amazon. The first way is the one most of us know: slash and burn. Cut the trees, let them dry, set them on fire, walk away. The fire reaches 800 or 900 degrees Celsius. Most of the carbon in the wood is released into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. A little ash remains. The ash gives the soil a quick boost of potassium and lime. 2 or 3 good harvests, sometimes 5. Then the soil is depleted. The farmer moves to the next patch. The cycle continues. The forest never recovers because the same family is back on that patch in 8 years before the canopy has reformed. That is the modern method. That is the method that burned 40,000 square kilometers of Amazon rainforest in 2024. That is the method releasing 840 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalents per year from Brazil's land use change alone. And yes, that number is from 2021, peer-reviewed, published in PMC, citation in the description. Slash and burn is a known carbon hemorrhage. It is also an old technique, older than agriculture, older than civilization. The earliest evidence comes from 12,000 years ago in places like the Levant. The Amazon, though, The Amazon for centuries did something else, the other method, slash and char. Slash and char looks the same in the first 5 minutes. You cut, you stack, you dry, but then instead of setting it on fire and walking away, you smother it. You bury the burning wood with green palm leaves, or pack moist clay over the burn pit, or place an inverted clay vessel over the pile. Anything that limits the oxygen. The wood does not combust. It pyrolyzes. The temperature stays below 500 degrees Celsius. The chemistry shifts. Instead of all the carbon escaping as gas, most of it stays behind as a stable black solid. Char, biochar in modern terminology. Anywhere from 40 to 50% of the original carbon stays in the ground, compared to about 3% for slash and burn. A 17-fold difference in carbon retention from one variable, temperature. Here is the chemistry. Slow down. This is the part I want you to hear. Plant cell walls are made primarily of cellulose, hemicellulose, and lignin. Lignin is the woody backbone. Long carbon chains, cross-linked. At combustion temperatures above 600 degrees Celsius in the presence of oxygen, those carbon chains break apart and recombine with oxygen to form carbon dioxide gas. The gas rises, the carbon is lost from the soil, forever on a human timescale. The cycle releases between 5 and 6 tons of CO2 per ton of dry biomass burned. At pyrolysis, temperatures between 300 and 500 degrees Celsius, in the absence of oxygen, those same lignin chains do something different. They lose their volatile components, water, methanol, acetic acid, terpenes, and what remains is a porous aromatic carbon structure called biochar, recalcitrant carbon, carbon that resists microbial decomposition for hundreds, sometimes thousands of years. Glazer's lab at Bayreuth measured terra preta soils with 70 times more black carbon content than the surrounding lateritic earth. 70 times. The carbon is still there, 1,500 years after the people who put it there were buried. That difference, 3% versus 50%, is not folklore. That is published. Lehman and Joseph, Biochar for Environmental Management, EarthScan, 2009. The textbook is the modern Bible of the field. Citation in the description. The Amazon practiced this for at least 2,000 years before Europeans arrived. The black earth patches archaeologists have mapped cover roughly 10% of the Amazon basin, 10%, made by human hands, over generations. A continental-scale geoengineering project hidden in plain sight under a canopy of trees we thought was pristine wilderness. Sombrook estimated, before he died, that those black earth deposits represent more carbon stored in Amazonian soil than the rest of the basin's soils combined, from slash and char. So what happened? 1542. Orellana sails the river, sees the cities. Months later, the smallpox arrives, brought ashore by Portuguese traders on the lower Amazon. Within a single human lifetime, the population of the Amazon basin collapses. Modern estimates put the mortality at 90 to 95%. The city's empty. The fields go to forest. The Black Earth recipe, which was an intergenerational technology, taught father to daughter, mother to son, season by season, over thousands of years. That recipe died with the carriers. By 1600, when European traders returned, the river was empty. The forest had reclaimed everything. The black earth patches lay buried under fresh leaf litter. Anyone who knew how to make new black earth was dead. The knowledge had not been written down. It had been carried, the way every important piece of indigenous knowledge in the Americas was carried, in the bodies and stories of the people themselves. The bodies were gone. So was the knowledge. Here is the part nobody told you about smallpox. Smallpox kills, of course. Hemorrhagic, fast, brutal. But the larger killer in the Americas in the 16th century was not the virus directly. It was the collapse of every system that depended on continuous human presence. The smiths, the midwives, the seed savers, the black earth makers. Every one of those knowledge systems requires uninterrupted transmission, generation to generation. Smallpox broke transmission. The black earth recipe survived in the soil itself, just not in any living head, for 500 years after that, until Sombrook's notebooks, until Glazer's papers, until a few archaeologists at the University of Florida in the 1970s. That knowledge sat in the ground like a fossil, visible, unreadable. People walked across it for centuries and assumed the dark stripe in the soil was geological, a natural quirk of Amazon weathering. It wasn't. It was 1,000 years of someone's careful work, preserved by the very technology they used. Now we come back to that one number, the 400 degrees Celsius, because the question we are facing in 2026 is exactly the question those vanished Amazonian farmers solved. How do you remove standing biomass from a piece of land without losing the carbon to the sky and ruining the soil for the next generation? The answer is a temperature gauge. If you have ever burned brush in your backyard, you have done slash and burn. The pile sat in oxygen, burned hot, released most of its carbon as smoke. The ash that was left worked for 1 or 2 seasons and then washed out in the next heavy rain. You started over the next year. You did exactly what the Amazon does today, and what the Amazon was not doing 1,500 years ago. Here is how to do slash and char in a backyard, step by step, carefully, with safety on every step. Because this is fire we are talking about, and I will not have any viewer of this channel injured because I was casual about it. Step 1. Choose a fire-safe site. Bare soil, sand, gravel, or concrete pad. No grass, no leaves, no tree branches overhead within 20 feet, no dry vegetation within 30 feet. Have a full bucket of water and a shovel within arm's reach the entire time. Wind under 10 miles per hour. Local burn permits in order where they apply. Daylight only, never alone. Step 2. Gather clean, dry biomass. Hardwood branches, brush, garden waste, corn stalks. The size of an adult forearm or smaller. Never, never. Never burn pressure-treated lumber, painted wood, plywood, particleboard, oily debris, or anything that has seen a coat of varnish or stain. Those released dioxins? Formaldehyde, hexavalent chromium, and persistent organic pollutants you do not want anywhere near your soil or your lungs. Clean wood only. Step 3. Build a cone-shaped pile, 3 feet wide at the base, 3 feet tall. Or use a cone kiln. A cone kiln is the simplest production tool. It is a sheet metal cone, open at the top, narrow at the bottom, set on a pad of sand. You drop branches in from the top. The narrow base limits oxygen. The combustion happens in a thin layer at the surface, which is what you want. Cone kilns cost around $150. They produce 20 to 30 pounds of biochar per burn. Or you can dig a trench in the ground 3 feet deep, 2 feet wide, and burn in there. The trench walls do the oxygen limiting. Step 4. Light the top. This matters. Light from the top of the pile, not the bottom. In a top-lit pile, the burn front travels downward through the wood, the smoke rising through unburnt material above the burn front cooks the wood as it goes. The result is much cleaner combustion, lower temperature, more char, less ash, less smoke. Bottom-lit fires roar upward, hit 800 degrees, and turn everything to ash. Top-lit fires stay around 400, and that is the slot you want. Step 5. Add fuel as you go. Drop new branches on top as the burn descends. The pile stays full. The narrow base stays starved of oxygen. The wood pyrolyzes instead of combusting. You will see no white ash forming at the bottom. You will see black chunks of glowing char. That is the indicator. White ash means too hot. Black glowing char means right temperature. Step 6. Quench. Once the pile has converted, before the char begins burning to white ash, douse the entire pile with water. Several gallons. Hiss and steam. Continue stirring with the shovel, wet thoroughly. Let cool for 24 hours. Char that looks cold is sometimes still smoldering inside. Leave overnight. Confirm the next morning. Step 7. Crush. Break the cooled char into small fragments, roughly the size of a pencil eraser. A simple way is to spread the char on a tarp, fold the tarp over it, and walk on it. Step 8. Charge. This is the step everyone skips, and skipping it ruins the entire year. Fresh biochar is full of empty pores and no nutrients. If you put it directly into your soil, it sucks up nitrogen from the surrounding earth for the first 6 to 12 months. Your crops will actually do worse for one season. To prevent this, you charge the biochar. Soak it for 30 days in a mix of urine and compost tea, or layer it into a compost pile for a season. The pores fill with nutrients and microbes. Then it goes into the soil, ready to release, not absorb. That is the protocol. 2 days of careful work, properly done, produces 20 to 30 pounds of charged biochar, enough to amend a typical raised vegetable bed. What does it do to your soil? Here is the science. Plain. Biochar's porous structure provides surface area in the range of 2 to 400 square meters per gram. A single tablespoon of biochar has more internal surface area than a football field. That surface holds water through capillary action, holds nutrients in the negatively charged pore walls, and houses soil microbes that would otherwise have nowhere to live. A single addition of charged biochar to a vegetable bed increases water retention by about 30%, reduces nutrient leaching by about 40%, and stays in the soil for hundreds of years. You do this once per bed, properly, and that bed is improved for the rest of your life. The crop response in published trials has been modest in temperate soils, about 10 to 20% yield improvement in the first 3 seasons, and dramatic in tropical, weathered, low organic matter soils. Sometimes triple. The Amazon got triple because the Amazon's underlying soil was almost dead to begin with. Black earth resurrected it. Now I want to come back to the one number, the 400 degrees. Because I think the most important thing tonight is not the recipe for biochar. The recipe is in the description, in the citations, in any number of how-to videos on the internet. The most important thing is the realization that one knob, set differently, is the difference between a continent's worth of forest and a continent's worth of ash. The same trees, the same labor, the same hour of work in the afternoon. One technique gives you tomatoes off the same patch for 1,500 years. The other technique gives you ash for 5 and then dessert. We are still making that choice. Every burn pile in every backyard, every clear cut, every Amazonian smallholder who burns his 50 acres because that is what his neighbors burn. 400 degrees with a barrier, with a top light, with a quench, or 800 degrees with a match and a walkaway. The difference is the temperature gauge, the knowledge to choose. That choice was carried in human bodies in the Amazon for 2,000 years and then died of smallpox in a single decade. We have been working 5 centuries to put it back into living memory. Some of you, watching this tonight, will be the people who put it back. The people who burn cleaner brush in your own yard. The people who teach a neighbor or a grandchild. The people who carry the temperature in their heads and the why and the how. That is how transmission works. Person to person, slow, real, generation by generation. Out of the ash, Something always grows, but only if you know what to make of the ash. In the comments, I want to ask you, have you ever burned brush in your yard? Did you know about biochar before tonight? Did your family ever tell you stories about smothered fires, covered pits, charcoal making in a barrel? Tell me. Every one of those stories is a fragment of the same knowledge the Amazon was carrying. They are not all gone, they are scattered. The lot of us together are reassembling them. I want to leave you with one more piece, because the Amazon was not the only culture that found this temperature window. Listen. In Japan, since at least the Edo period, rice farmers made something called kuntan. They piled rice hulls, the dry chaff left after threshing, into a cone around a small chimney pipe set on the ground. They lit a fire at the base of the chimney. The chimney pulled air upward through the center, but the rice hulls around it stayed in low oxygen smolder. After about 12 hours, the entire mound had blackened into a fine, light, porous biochar. That biochar went back into the rice paddy as a soil amendment. The same paddy fields in Niigata Prefecture in southern Honshu have been farmed continuously for 1,000 years with no decline in yield. The University of Tokyo Soil Science Department published their analysis of those soils in 2018. Black carbon content is elevated by a factor of 12 over the regional average. Kuntan, the same technology as terra preta, same temperature window, same logic. Independently invented on the opposite side of the planet by people who never met an Amazonian farmer. In medieval Sweden, charcoal makers built turf-covered earth mounds called mylor. They stacked split wood inside a clay or sod dome, lit a small fire at the base, and sealed the dome. For 2 weeks, the wood smoldered at low temperature inside the airtight earth shell. The result was metallurgical charcoal, pure carbon, used for smelting iron, and the waste pile from each season's mylor was rich in fine biochar. Old Swedish farms built on the sites of medieval charcoal mylor still test in 2024 with measurably higher carbon content than surrounding fields. A study from Sveriges Lantbruksuniversitet, the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences, mapped this in 2022. The medieval iron industry by accident produced a side product that fertilized the surrounding farms for the next 8 centuries. In West Africa, the Mossi people of Burkina Faso make charcoal in shallow earth pits. Same logic. Wood, smother, low oxygen, slow burn. The pits are tiny by industrial standards, 3 feet wide, 18 inches deep, but every village has them. The pits are visible from satellite photos because the soil around them, after a century of pit-side leakage, is darker than the surrounding savanna. African black earth, African terra preta, same temperature window, same chemistry. We are watching, in real time, what an indigenous knowledge system looks like before colonial agriculture buries it. Yakuba Sawadogo, the Burkinabe farmer who restored 4,000 hectares of degraded Sahel with traditional zai pits, told an interviewer in 2017 that his grandfather's generation had still been adding charcoal to the planting pits as a matter of routine. By Yakuba's generation, the charcoal step had been mostly forgotten. He brought it back. The pits with charcoal produce yields nearly double the pits without. Same plant, same rain, same year. The black carbon difference: 3 cultures, 3 continents, 1 temperature window, independently arrived at, kept alive in oral knowledge for centuries, almost lost in the modern transition. There is something quietly extraordinary about the fact that humans, in widely separated places, walked the same chemical path. The reason is simple. The chemistry is universal. Carbon does not care which culture is processing it. Carbon cares about the temperature gauge. 400 degrees Celsius is 400 degrees Celsius in Manaus, in Niigata, in Stockholm, in Ouagadougou. The number is the same, and the discovery every time was the same. They figured out, somehow, how to walk the line between fire that destroys and fire that preserves. The modern slash and burn we see in news photos from the Amazon today is not the older method coming back. It is a much newer technique. Industrial chainsaws, kerosene rags, deliberate ignition under high wind, designed to clear the maximum area in the shortest time for soy and cattle pasture. The traditional Amazonian people who survived the smallpox collapse and who continue to live in scattered communities do not practice this. They never did. What we are watching on satellite imagery is a recent technology, 3 or 4 generations old at most, dating from the post-war push to convert rainforest to commodity production. It looks ancient because we associate forest clearing with antiquity. It is not. It is a 20th century method scaled to a 21st century atmosphere. The older method, the 400-degree method, slips back in surprising places. The cool burn movement among Aboriginal Australian land managers has, since about 2015, gained traction in the Northern Territory. Deliberate, low-temperature burns set in the cool early morning, walking pace by skilled firewalkers. The fires never reach the canopy. They consume only the dry grass layer. The temperature stays below 500 Celsius. The result is identical in principle to slash and char. Black carbon stays in the soil instead of escaping into the air. Australian government data shows 50% reductions in net annual carbon emissions from Indigenous managed properties that practice cool burn versus standard government burn protocols. 50% from temperature management. And one more thing before you go. Next time on this channel, I am going to walk you through the cone kiln itself, the specific dimensions, the metal gauge, why one shape produces a clean 20% yield and another shape produces 8% and a lot of smoke. The geometry is older than recorded history. The math is precise. The number is 2-to-1, base diameter to height. There is a reason every traditional charcoal kiln in every culture, from West Africa to medieval Sweden to Japanese kuntan rice husk production, ends up at the same ratio. The number is the same. Stay with me. There's a reason no one talks about this anymore. Out of the ash, something always grows.